All right. So today I'm going to be doing a video describing the different data documents that are available on the First Steps Kent Millage portal. This is just a way for all of our providers and everyone who is doing the different programs to better understand the different data documents available to you so that you can have a better understanding of how data submissions and the data documents work as a whole. So the first thing I want to talk about here is if you go to our First Steps Kent Millage portal, that is firststepskent.org/millage portal, and you scroll down, you can scroll down to specifically the Data Fund tab, and these are the documents that I'm going to be talking about. There is the Standard Data Fields Definitions document, there is the File Definitions document, and there is the Template Data Submissions document, and then to a lesser extent, there's also the Agencies IDs document. So I'm going to be talking about these four specific documents. I want to start by talking about the Standard Data Field Definitions, and then we will go from there to the other documents. So currently I can pull up this is the Standard Data Collection Fields Definitions document. I know it has a slightly different name, but this is the same document that is up there. So the biggest things to take away from this document is it is a kind of less technical data fields document. It includes different pieces that can allow you to, without having to know too much and dig into too much of the technical aspects of the documentation, it can tell you different pieces about what your kind of general data submissions should have included in them. So depending on what organization you are and what type of funding you received, that will kind of determine the different fields that you will be submitting. So the 5 different kind of current programming types that we have are outreach and navigation, home visiting, healthy development, healthy and safe homes, and play and learn work. So they're all kind of listed here on the left side of the document. And if you look at them, you'll see that there's X's beneath them. If there is an X beneath that document, beneath that piece, that is a data field that you will want to make sure that you are putting data into and collecting specifically for your programs. Now, there is some caveats to this. Specifically, if you look at the top of this document here, there is these other types of pieces that can also be included in this section, which mostly pertain to our home visiting and healthy development providers. So if I scroll down here, then you can see right here and also right here as well. There is a BF, which is birth to 5, and PN, which means prenatal. That means that if your work involves you working with children birth to 5 in a home visiting or healthy development setting, these are data fields that you will be looking more to collect. And if it has a PN or prenatal, that is focused more upon prenatal work and work before birth to 5. So that's the first thing that I want to highlight with this. The next thing that I want to highlight is this document is broken down into 3 major sections. So we have the intake and demographic fields, we have the referral fields, and then finally we have the services fields. Now, each of these are broken down specifically, and we can get more into that when we get to the other documents. But just to be aware, that means they're slightly separated out to allow you to better understand where kind of fields will go in the final data submissions. Included in this is essentially just different kind of general pieces that you might want to know. So there is the data fields, which is just what is the data field called in a general name, and then the definition and code information. So if you're looking at this and you see, for example, this demographic update field, so that is the data field, and then it has a definition: are there updates to the client's demographic information? So in this case, if there was a previously submitted line of data, which includes information about the demographics, and it's an update from a previous file, then you would code it differently than if it was not. As we can see here, there's the multiple codes for this. So there's a 1 for yes and a 2 for no. That is pretty much standard for the coding for the yes and no categories, but there's other different codes that you can run across. For example, in this record type, we see that there is who is receiving the service as a definition, or the question being asked for that. And then the focus is child, expectant parent, or additional child under 5 living at home. And then there's also a 98 for other. So this is another thing that we'll see a lot when it comes to the coding, is this particular look of this. So you can see that there's kind of different definitions for those pieces, and you can kind of see how the coding looks. Another code that you'll see pretty frequently, as we see under this gender identity piece, is the not available code, which the not available code is specifically focused on if the information is not available for some reason, possibly the data, possibly the client doesn't feel comfortable with submitting the data on those pieces. That was where you could use the code for not available. So that is another code, or just generally that data might not be available for that family. So those are different reasons for those different types of codes. So as we kind of scroll down here, we see there's a lot of different data fields, and there's different types of kind of data fields as well. There's these coded, there's text entry, and there's also date entry fields. And then including that, I believe there might be 1 or 2 other fields. But if we scroll down to the bottom of this document, we can see as we're kind of passing through the different data fields, but closer to the bottom of this document is the next thing I kind of want to highlight. So as we kind of see here, there is 2 different other pieces that you want to look at, and there's also numerical fields. Apologies for not explaining that one. So there is the definitions piece, which the definitions piece specifically is focused on different definitions that you might see throughout, or different words that you might see throughout that we want to make sure that we highlight and describe more. So we see here that there is household, which is a household unit where individuals and related and unrelated live for more than a year together, defines what a household is. So if there's a field that describes something as a household or has the word household in it, that is what we are describing. The next piece that we are looking to talk about is those technical notes for that specific piece. So we saw those in parentheses, the different coded and text entry pieces. This is where you'll see the different descriptions of them in a general sense. So text entry, these fields are string data types that will have variable character limits, which we'll get more into as we get into the next document. Then there's other pieces like date entry. And if you look through these, you'll see just the different descriptions of what these fields are to give you a better sense of what you're looking at. So the last piece that I want to highlight for this document, so that you have a better understanding, is the updates section. So at the bottom, if there are any updates from a previous document, you'll see them kind of highlighted here. So currently from the previous document, I have these updates, and as I kind of create new documents or any small updates are altered, they'll be defined down here to let you know and get a quick sense of when you're looking at this document compared to a previous document, what kind of updates have been made. So as we can kind of see here, there's different codes that were added from the previous documents. So that is kind of the overview of this general fields of this document. So with that piece, I kind of want to move on to the next document that I want to talk about, specifically focused on the field definitions document. So this document more breaks down the technical aspects of the data that is being submitted. So I want to move over to that quickly. So the way that this document is broken down, as you'll see it kind of on the Millage website, is there is different pieces to be highlighted. So you'll see that there is 3 different files, which correspond to the different files that we're asking for your groups to submit to the county. So there is the demographic file again, and then, oops, apologies, I don't have the right document up. That is my bad. But the easiest way to get it again is if you just go onto the Ready by 5 millage portal, you can see that it pops right up like this. So specifically, we have the demographics file, we have the referral file, we have the services file, and then the last kind of piece of this documentation is the code book. So this describes all of the different codes that correspond as we kind of go through. And then again, a updates page to describe the different updates from previous files to new files. So when it comes to the different documents, you'll also see there's some different file maintenance pieces at the bottom here that kind of give you a better sense of how these files might be used and how the general sense of what the files might end up looking like for the final template submission, which we'll talk about a little bit more when we get into the template data submission file. So different things to highlight again with this is we have first the field order. So with field order, that is specifically focused on, this is the order of which the fields that will be included in your submission will come in. So we're asking that you have all of the fields included in these files included in your data submissions, but to highlight the fact that some of the fields will be left blank with no data included in them because they're not included in your programming. So the field order, obviously we have them from 1, in this case, to 38 on the demographics file, and then so on and so forth through the different files. Again, we see the name. So this is the name of the data type, or the data field, I should say. And with those data fields, they correspond again back to the other document. This is kind of another document to be used in tangent. There's some other comments here. They're not overly important, but kind of different standard pieces. Like, for example, if you're using the child's first name, you use the full legal name of that first name, and so on and so forth for the different pieces, including some other pieces as, for example, the format of dates. There's an example included here, which is how the final product of your data should look like when it's put in a singular line for file submissions, which we'll see more as we get into the template file. The next piece that gets into kind of the more technical side of this documentation is the data type. So when data is being entered, there's 3 different types that you'll end up usually seeing in a lot of different programming. So there is strings, which is just, again, a kind of text entry data field. There is codes, which we're using as the different codes that you'll be using for particular entries. These have specific responses, which are limited. Again, and we saw them in the previous document as those were the limited responses. And you can find the different codes in the code table corresponding with the name included right here under code table. So for example, if we are looking for child gender identity, we can go to in the code, and that is a coded field. We can go to the code table, and in the code table under gender, we will see the different available codes for this. So as you can see highlighted here, there is male, female, non-binary, other, and not available. And then their corresponding coded numbers to better understand what they are. So if we highlight and go back up, we can see under that as well, we gave an example of 2, which in that case, if we go back to the code book, we can see that that gender would be female under that example. The next piece that I want to highlight is the character limit, so the number of character limit. This doesn't come into effect a lot as long as you are kind of following the standards that are set through. So we have some character limits, for example, for some of the coded fields is up to 2, which corresponds to the number that you can put in for your coded field. So again, using gender identity as an example, you have 1, 2, 3, 98, and 99 as choices, which would say if you put in a 99, that is the character limit. So the limit of the number of characters that you can put in a entry in a data line, which for that case also includes spaces. So the more important time for character limits is when we are looking at string data types. So for the strings, there is different character limits included. These are highlighted here. And for the different character limits that we have, we can see that, for example, for child first name, the character limit is currently 35. So if a character limit goes over that amount, there could be a possibility of some of the data being cut from that submission when it's finally submitted to the county, or have that be checked for that sort of work. The last and probably the other important piece that I want to highlight would be specifically focused on validation. So under this, there is different pieces that are going to be checked when data submissions are submitted to the county. So for example, when we see different pieces specifically for dates, we see that there is the description of how the date is kind of included, which we see here also in the comments of that format, which says it includes separators and includes zeros. So if we look back at this example, we'll see that for the data submission, we see that it is 05/07/2016 with slashes included, and all of the zeros included for the different months and days. And so that will be the format. And then, for example, for other strings, we see that there is no special characters included, such as a comma. This might include other things such as semicolons. Just generally, when it comes to those submissions, we're looking for specifically no real special characters included, just really the letters included for that name or suffix. Other pieces, as you can see, you can read through, only use record type equal to 98. If we're looking at record type, only used if record type equals 98. So if we see for record type and record type other, kind of what the different pieces are for that. And then other descriptions include number of months or number of weeks for this. So that is the general sense of this, an overview of this document. There is a couple other things. The biggest thing for this, again, is that you kind of read through this, you have the field order correct, and that you have all of the fields included for the work that you are doing, and some that you might not be doing work for, but will be included in the final template submission. So the final piece that I want to talk about is that template submission. So under the Millage portal, again, if I scroll back to that really quickly. So if I scroll down again to the data fund piece, we have the template data submission, which it says under here that this is meant to serve an example of how data submissions should look for each data file. This will be submitted, that will be submitted to the county. So I have that up here, and it is an Excel file under the look. And there are two big pieces to highlight when it comes to this file. There is the profile section, and then there are the different files corresponding to the files in the other two, and the other headings included in the other two documents that I've just talked about. So the profiles give you a general sense of what the data that will be submitted looks like without having it in its finalized format. These profiles will not be something that you will be submitting to the county, but just give you a good example of, for example, what the different lines of data that I have included in those files actually look like, from a sense of if you had them on possibly an intake form. So you get this type of information from this intake form. For example, like the organization, what the ID is in the system for that record ID, and other pieces of information that might be useful when it comes to the final submissions. These examples are used to give you a different sense of what you might be submitting for your data, depending on your program. Again, as we talked about before with the different files, there's different data pieces that align to the different programs that you are working for. So in that sense, there is, again, different data pieces that are important and will be kind of highlighted as we go through. So as we can kind of see in this example, this first one, this is a generic first-time child entry for possibly a home visiting or healthy development group. So this is the different kind of data that might end up being collected for that child. And then when we scroll over to a file piece, so in this case, there's a demographic profile, and then I go over to the demographics section, this will show what that looks like for that particular child. So we see for that first example, as it is kind of highlighted, again, has been shown through the other two documents, these are the different fields that are going to be put in and what their kind of final product will look like. So if we go back for a second to the, again, let me pull that up, the file definitions document, we'll see in the demographics file, we have a piece such as the child gender identity. And so if I scroll through, I see that child gender identity is right here, should be in the correct placement of the field and in the order that is put in. And we can see that that is coded as a 1. And if we go back to the demographic profile, we see that the gender identity of the child is male in this case, which corresponds to a 1 from the code book, and that we can see was put in as a 1 for the final, for the example final submission to the county. So with that, you can kind of see how other fields are also laid out. There's different pieces such as child address, which was the string field, and record ID, which is also a string field. I just have it included as a as numbers in this case, but will come out as a string. So we can see from this document how different data submissions might look for the different files, making sure that they're all in the order being asked for, and that fields that might not apply to your work are left blank. So for example, in the demographics, we can see here that for weeks pregnant upon intake for this first individual is left blank because it is more focused on prenatal work, but is still included as a data piece that could be collected, but is not included, but it has no data included for that specific line. Now, if you're a home visiting or healthy development provider and you're really focused on exclusively doing work in the birth to 5 area, you'll never have anything in those submissions, but you'll have the data fields included for the final submission look. So again, there's other fields in here that are included for different types of examples that you might run across as you're kind of going through. So you can use these all to kind of get a better sense of what your final data submission will look like for your program. And we kind of see as they're looked through with these different pieces. And of course, there's again a update section. So again, we see the different types of possible services that we might run into. I tried to make them as extensive as possible. You can look through the different examples that are included here and look for ones that best fit or help you best understand how your data submission should look. And just as kind of a quick tip as well, for those who might not know, this is, as we have seen, is an Excel file. But if you're looking to do work specifically for the submissions, we have said that we want to look at CSV files. So a lot of it can be that when you're trying to submit, you're trying to figure out, oh, well, how do I get my data into a comma separated value file? If you happen to have your reports come out into an Excel document, it can be pretty simple, as you can go into your file section and then you can go to save. I have to enable saving on this one, of course. So go back, I can click save as, and I can just go and browse. And then when I'm looking to finally submit, let's say I was getting something ready and I had to submit it to the OneDrive that you'll be receiving from our county at the contact at the county, Neil Torin, you can go down and you can see that there is a comma delimited file, so CSV file right here under the save as type. And if you just save it, name it as you should. I have this as template data submission, but name it, kind of give it the general naming convention as possibly your name of your program, data submission and then the month of submission. That way we have a better sense, and the file being submitted. That will give you a general sense of what the kind of file is that you're looking at. This will probably only focus specifically on the file that I'm currently in, but that is just a way for you to get your final report set up if you possibly are looking at Excel. And there are other similar ways to get things into CSV files for different reports. It would just be making sure that you're saving it as the correct file type. So that is the kind of biggest things for those three files. The last file that I want to highlight quickly is the agency ID for round 2. So this is another file that is included on our millage portal. So we'll see where it is under data fund here really quickly. We see it's the last file for the agency IDs. And so this is the specific agency ID that you'll be using in your template data submission. So you see under here, there is agency ID. I have it currently the same for all of the examples, just as an example piece. But for your specific program, you can look into this file for round 2, and you can see that this is the system of letters that you'll be using to describe as your agency ID. So we can see here for the Arbor Circle Infant Toddler Developmental Services, we can see that theirs is ACDSHD. And the general convention is the organization you're a part of, if it's an individual program for that organization, trying to use something to highlight that, and then the program type that you are, if you are a healthy development, home visiting, or play and learn group that you kind of see. So for example, here as well, we have Cherry Health. So we have Cherry Health, and they are doing a healthy and safe homes piece. So that is HSH. You can look through this document on your own and find your agency ID, and that will be everything that you need to kind of know. So that is all I really have on these documents. You guys can always email me if you have any more questions past this video that we put together. My email again is Aman, A-M-A-N, at firststepskent.org. Just send me a quick email if there's anything that seems a little bit confusing. I hope that this kind of helps you all better understand the different files that you might come across in the different documents on our millage portal. So thanks, guys.